Welcome to the Wayward Sunday service, the show where we poorly discuss the universe, spirituality, and the ways we cope with having to exist every day. Please don't assume that anything you hear here is good advice, medical guidance, or in any way, shape, or form authority on any subject discussed herein. We are simply two dumb people talking about things we think are important so that you, the listener, can hopefully feel a little more understood, or at the very least feel better about yourself because of how ridiculous we are. Thank you, find a comfy seat, and enjoy the show.
We
All
have no
right.
intro planned.
We don't have an intro planned. Welcome to the Wayward Inn. If you are checking in for the night, please be advised. We may have double booked with the interdimensional elves. You may be required to share a room. All right, I guess I'll go by Jolk. That's probably best. Keep myself anonymous.
I go by Flank, I suppose, though it's not a very anonymous name, and I don't really
No,
mind.
you're very searchable.
Yes, incredibly.
I am less so, but probably still findable. I don't really mind. Not a big deal, as long as nobody shows up at my house at some point.
That's the goal, anyways.
All right, so go ahead, talk us through what is the Wayward Inn?
I suppose my vision of the inn is just a place for, um, I guess, safe discussion of self regarding spirituality and how that integrates with things like substance use, more of a focus on psychedelics and altered states of consciousness, but also just experience in general, um, what it means to be a human being, what it means to be an animal, what it means to be something more than that. Um, to me, it's like a spiritual version of like Arrowhead or having some trip reports, but it's also beyond that in terms of self-expression. Um, we've got a wiki where I like to post creative writing, and a lot of that has nothing to do with a lot of it I write while I'm tripping, but it goes beyond those experiences for me as well. I do a lot of it when I'm not tripping and um, enjoy just expressing myself that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It's just a place to express the idea of being oneself and the human experience. Because while a lot of it is going to be focused around psychedelic experiences, of course, that's just part of the experience. I think a lot of it is spiritual, universal truth that we're seeking after and looking for, especially in a world where that's not as important to most people anymore. It's extremely common for that to be kind of lost on most people as they go throughout the day to day life. So it's kind of a place to take a break, step back, and observe yourself from the outside, and kind of just see things from a safer perspective, a perspective that's not so full of anxiety and stress. And that's important for me, at least, to kind of take a step back from the anxiety of the day to day experience and sort of just picture who I am in a universal and an infinite sense. I think that's really, really important.
I would agree with that. Yeah, to me, the end is a place where I see myself with sympathy. I see myself with a desire to, um, I wouldn't necessarily say to be better, but to know what I'm working with,
Yeah.
so that I can use it in a way that suits what I'm looking for in life, and also a place to try and learn what exactly that is that I'm looking for.
Well, and to give some context to anybody who might be listening, you and I met when we were serving missions for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, the Mormon Church, which we have since left, both of us, in some degree or way. Neither of us are active, of course. It was definitely an eye opening experience. That's the religious background there. I don't intend for this to contain much discussion about the LDS faith. I think there's plenty of information out there, and it's also just kind of boring. But for those who come here seeking that kind of information and that kind of help, that'll be a good space as well, just to kind of escape your preconceived notions of the world and of religion and spirituality in general, just to feel a little less judged, I guess, and a place to learn things that perhaps those in charge would not want you to learn or see in a safe way that doesn't make you feel judged or angry or anything like that. I think that's really important because a lot of my experience leaving the church and finding myself was through anger and judgment, and I don't think it was healthy. I don't feel like I gained a lot from being angry all the time and learning information and things about both the universe and substances, drug use, things like that, where I realized that I had been lied to most of my life. It made me very angry, and it wasn't good for my character development or my self development. I was just hurt and anxious all the time, and that's kind of the antithesis of what we would like to accomplish here. So this is a place for all backgrounds and all people, regardless of what you believe to be true. And if we don't believe in something, that does not mean that somebody else cannot believe in that thing.
Absolutely. And like, I do also want to point out, like, the way I left the church, I'll talk a little bit about it first. Um, the way I left the church had a lot less to do with anger for me and a lot more to do with just fear, and feeling trapped. Um, the circumstances I won't totally dive into. But I had joined the church when I was like 17 or 18, and then left when I was 19 as I started discovering some things about myself that were contradictory to what the LDS church taught. Um, and then as time went on, I found reasons to re-enter the church, and then yeah, eventually I pursued someone within the church and went on a mission. And coming back out of that was very jarring. Um, though I wouldn't really face what I went through on the mission until much later. Like within the last years when I really started thinking about everything that happened and all of that. And it absolutely gave me like a great spiritual lens to start with. But leaving it, I have had to discard most of it. Um, there's very few pieces of what I was taught there that I still hold with me, but those things I do hold very dear. And the experiences themselves mean much mean different things than they used to. Um, but my leaving was one
Yeah,
of
I
fear.
think that's a big deal for like a lot of people is that at least the people I've known who have left churches in general, not just the Mormon church, which is a big one. A lot of people are leaving that currently, but there's a lot of religions out there that people are escaping from. I hate to use the word escaping because that's not necessarily the truth. There's a lot of people who are quite happy in these religions, and that's fine. There's no problem with that. But I think a lot of people, they come out of it thinking that because they've decided that it's no longer true, that nothing they learned is true, and that to me is kind of a bad attitude to have. I mean, I understand it. I totally understand because you do feel lied to when you start to discover that some things are true. But I think it's less lied to and more just like confused. I think a lot of the people, including the people that run these organizations, are confused. I don't really think that they're just lying for gain like a lot of people would. And I think I see that attitude a lot online where it's all a big conspiracy. These people know what they're doing. They're just there to take your money. I don't think that's the case. I think that there's some genuine good happening there, but it's just not for me. It was something I was uncomfortable in.
Exactly. I think most people, including leaders of most religious organizations, on some level need to convince themselves that they are good on the right side of whatever forces in the universe exist. Um, and so I think for those leaders, what they are doing to them is genuinely good. Um, and I think keeping up that belief also requires some ignorance of the pain that they might cause, or rather the pain that others might suffer, um, for some of the things that are taught. Um, but at the same time, I also recognize it's the responsibility of those within the organization to accept or deny what is being given to them. And I think a big issue happens when religious organizations speak as though leaving the organization is a detriment not only to yourself but your eternal self. Um, because then there's this inherent fear that comes with even just being a member, that everything you do is better this way than it would be outside of the organization. So anything that's hurting you in the organization, you are scared that it will hurt even more outside of it. Um,
Yeah, I think that's visible a lot in not only like heavily involved religions like Mormonism, but also people who just grow up in a culture that is religious in general. Like I have a lot of family that is Catholic, and a lot of them are devoted because of their belief, but there are some that just grew up that way, and they just feel like there's just no other alternative. There's just nothing else that they can learn or do, and so that's just the lifestyle that they live. And I think that even that societal pressure, that culture pressure, can be just as detrimental as like leadership pressure for sure.
yeah, I agree. Like, I think anything in society can become a thing of worship. Politics, education, um, relationships. I think all of them have the potential to become idols. I
Yeah,
think
I think
idolatry
that
has a lot more to do with how much of our life something takes up, rather than um, that it's taking up anything at all.
yeah, you just find something to like to focus on and to worship because it's easier than approaching the idea of yourself. You know, it's just the way I always said it, especially when we were on the mission, was that a lot of people have this laundry list of things that they need to get done so that when they die, they're okay. And that's a really scary mindset to me, because I would hate to get to the end of my life and then not have completed a list and be like, oh well, I screwed up. No more chances for me.
You've bowled your last strike, Joe. It's time to die.
So yeah, that's the idea, is creating a space where there's discussion on all beliefs and all ideas, and like you said, it's very centered around the idea of psychedelic out of body experiences, because I think that there's a lot of learning to be had there, and I know that you agree with me because you've had the same sort of experience. But that said, I don't think it's necessary at all. I think that a lot of spirituality achieves psychedelic like experiences without any substance whatsoever, and that is like more power to you. Honestly, that's amazing. That is something that I aspire to, because when you do these kind of substances and these kind of experiences, you do put yourself in danger, regardless of how safe they may or may not be. There's always a chance that you're going to harm yourself mentally, especially with pre-existing mental conditions, which I think is a lot of things that we're going to talk about over the course of our writings and our speaking together and everything like that. Is that, you know, you got to protect your brain. You only get one, and if you fry it,
No
you're
reset, man.
you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's where your progression stops. Even if you think you're progressing, you know, if you fuck up your brain, it's just kind of over for you.
yeah. The way you progress after that is very different, and you have to relearn.
Yeah. So that said, I think one of the things we wanted to discuss was specific media and things to read and study that may help somebody along their pathway away from traditional spirituality and religion and everything like that, or not even away, but something that helps them to gain a more universal and mindful outlook on life. You and I both originally bonded over the book A Course in Miracles,
Yes.
which was given to us by a friend. And I think that I actually don't know that I would recommend that as a starting point for somebody who's interested in taking a journey into like the unknown and studying the universe and spirituality. But at the same time, I guess there's no real starting point. I mean, my starting point was organized religion, and that's also not something I would recommend to somebody. I think that there's just no easy way to ease yourself into the study of spirituality. So that said, A Course in Miracles took me away from the idea that somebody else was writing down all these rules and these ways to act and be and just telling me what to do. It was much more an idea that I could teach myself and others, because at the end of the day, there's no scientific way to prove any sort of spirituality. There is no scientific method that can prove the existence or non-existence of a god or a spirit or a universal experience or anything like that. And so intrinsically, everybody who decides to study it is automatically at the cutting edge. They're like an expert on it. And I think that that's what A Course in Miracles taught me, is that like my opinion is just as valid as the Pope, or whatever it may be.
And conversely, I think it also shows us that our opinion is just as valid as some crackhead trying to break into our house. Like it's the truth. Like anyone that
Yeah,
we look
it's the
up
great
to.
equalizer.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the truth of humanity, is that the experiences that we go through are very similar, in the sense that we'll get the same feelings, we'll have many of the same doubts, we'll have many of the same frustrations with the world, as some of the greatest people that have ever lived, and as some of the worst people that have ever lived. Um, and I think that that reminder, that equalizer, was really important for me on the mission. Coming out of the MTC on the mission, you're taught that like you are this special person, while at the same time being taught that if you are disobedient, you are a sinner and you are bad and you cannot teach anyone, and you lose that specialness. And so what inevitably happens is, in the mission field, you will make a mistake, or you will feel guilty about something, and suddenly your identity is in jeopardy, because am I able to do the job that has been asked of me, or am I just another screw up? And so for me, A Course in Miracles was the answer that, yeah, you are a screw up, but also like you are still the same person you were. Like it doesn't matter. Um, there's no need to put weight towards not being a screw up, I guess. If you're still feeling like you're offering the world what you want to be offering it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that first step towards like becoming somebody who is more of a universal spiritual being rather than a practitioner of religion is that idea that the concept of sin is inherently broken. I think that you and I both had that realization at some point while we were out, and it completely takes you out of the regular human experience of feeling guilty for doing something that isn't inherently wrong. Like there's a big difference between walking up to somebody and just punch them in the fucking face and then feeling bad about it because you hurt somebody, and you know, waking up one morning and deciding not to go to church. And then you feel just as guilty, if not worse. I mean, I know a lot of people who would feel worse about not going to church than they would about quite literally assaulting somebody, because they think that it's going to impact them in the long run of their life, which I think is incredibly selfish. And when I had that realization that my guilt was selfish in nature, that was a big deal for me. Realizing that the only person that I was hurting was myself, because it was just me thinking, well, I want to be happy later on, so I have to be a good person. And that's such a selfish idea. Instead of saying, oh, I want to be helpful, or I want to contribute to the world and to humanity and to the universe, it was all about me. It's about what my reward was after I died.
I think we walked through that experience very differently. For me, I was very um, more willing than I think I would have wanted to be, to sacrifice myself for others. Um, Specifically with a desire to escape the guilt, um, and escape this feeling that everything that I everything bad that happened in the world around me was because I had done something wrong. Um, and the I think I was drawn to the Mormon Church in part because it told me that truth, which is something I already believed going in. Um, but but in the Mormon church as a missionary, like I felt like I had been uh, used for for that feeling and taken advantage of. And so leaving was this big hubbub of like, when I leave, I know I didn't have concerns too much about like going to hell or whatever, or not reaching some high enough glory when I die, but a lot more of it was about, am I going to still have like the opportunities I want to give to the world without this organization helping me find those opportunities? Um, am I still going to be able to share who I am without this obligation to do so? Um, and then if not, what am I worth? One,
That's such an interesting idea. Like the fact that you doing something quote unquote wrong is the cause of problems in other people's lives. Like I definitely got a lot of that. It's just like, oh yeah, so and so is back on drugs again because I fucking jerked off this morning. God damn it, it's my
that's
fault
really
because
what it
I'm
is,
not a
man.
because I'm a bad missionary. So they started taking drugs again. And then, yeah, it's such a hard thing to break yourself away from because you've been told your whole life that like if you're not obedient, bad things are going to happen. As if it's this like magical karmic system, except backwards, where it doesn't affect you poorly. It affects everybody else around you poorly just because you made poor decisions, and that just makes you feel like so disconnected from your friends and family as well. Like they don't seem like people you can ask for help because by doing these bad things, quote unquote, it's you're hurting them, and that's so toxic. That's so negative.
One of the things the Mormon Church did, and we've been on this topic for a while, but uh, we'll keep going a little bit. I want to say this, um, is it convinced me that one, being a wrong, like doing things wrong was evil, and then two, that I should be good at all costs. And I should appear good at all costs, because as long as I appear good,
Mm,
then like I'm going to be treated like I'm good, and I'm going to be reassured that I am good. And so I had
sure.
a very large motivation to hide myself, or at least hide those parts of myself that I perceived to be wrong or evil. Um, and so I never actually got to know who I was until A Course in Miracles, until I realized like I have a whole person to work with here, and whole people are complicated, and that doesn't make the human experience wrong. It just makes it what it is.
And that does make you so like empathetic towards others as well.
Hmm.
And like that's what's really interesting to me. Tying this back into having psychedelic experiences is that a lot of times when you have a psychedelic experience, you do feel empathetic to the people around you because you feel more connected. And a good spiritual experience can do the same thing. And I think that became my like litmus test for what I believed was true or not, is like, do I feel empathetic and loving towards the people around me regardless of who they are, or do I feel judgmental and hateful towards the people around me? And that became like my idea of what was a good experience necessarily. I mean, it could be a negative experience for me and I could be hurting and feeling pain, but at the same time, as long as I was understanding someone else and helping somebody else, it didn't really matter. And there's limits to that, of course. Like, you should not actively harm yourself to bring good to others. You should expect good to come to you as well. That's there's a fine balance between it. And I think A Course in Miracles addresses that really, really well. And I think that another book that we've both spent a lot of time in, the Gates of the Necronomicon, which is hotly debated whether or not it is fact or fiction, but regardless, the information therein is really, really good. It just teaches you to be on the lookout for information in general. Like, information and knowledge is neutral, whether it's good or bad. And you shouldn't avoid anything just because of how it may be perceived by others or by you. And I think that idea of like walking the gates and stepping outside of this reality and kind of questioning your own reality, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we have no idea what's going on. We can only comprehend what we see, what we hear, and the fact that I can take a pill and 2 hours later have no concept of sight or hearing or smell or taste just goes to prove that that's completely unreliable. And I think that's another really great one to kind of dive into. The Necronomicon and the Gates of the Necronomicon kind of take you out of this sensational human experience and teach you that there's so much more going on, way more than we could ever possibly comprehend.
Yeah, I feel like the gates of the Necronomicon introduced me to the concept of the seen and unseen. And I mean that was a thing inside of Christianity as well. I mean it's in that one prayer that I can't remember the name of. Um, oh, it's in the Nicene Creed or whatever. Um, but remembering that like there's parts of this world that I am not experiencing and parts that I am experiencing, as well as there are parts that I am experiencing that I am attaching meaning to, and other parts that I am not attaching meaning to. And in addition to the world, there are parts of myself that I am seeing, and there are parts of myself that I am not seeing at all times. Um, and so choosing what to see or what to focus on uh, is a really big focus of the Gates of the Necronomicon. At least that's what I took out of it. Um, and deciding that what I'm focusing on doesn't need to be what everyone else is focusing on, um, as well as understanding that just because nobody's focusing on something doesn't make it any less important to who I am.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's definitely similar to the experience that I got out of it. I think there was also like this sort of whimsical relief to understanding that like I'm very small in a very big universe, and like understanding that I mean there were several times where I let my ego get in the way of my studying of this stuff, and I was just like, man, I got it figured out. Like, I have learned how the universe works. I am better than everybody else. Like, there's definitely been a couple of times where I've had that feeling, and then I had to take a step back and be like, nah, dude, you're just a fucking hippie. Like, that's all you are. Like, you haven't even made like a serious amount of progress to be better than people who were here, 60, 70 years ago having the same experience as you. And it's just part and parcel of living. It's not figuring it out. It's not winning the game. It's not, beating the system or whatever. It's just about being comfortable and happy at the end of the day. I mean, like that's all it is. And the ability to be comfortable and happy in any experience is completely invaluable, but also not important at all. Like it doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you some like godly being that's figured it all out or whatever. It's just you're the same as everybody, and you're okay with
Yeah,
that. That's a huge thing.
it's interesting you say it's like the most important thing and it's not important at all. I feel like
Right.
there's this there's two sides to, I mean, like you're saying two very different things that seem contradictory, but it doesn't matter at all to the way the world like actually operates, which is without meaning. And it's the most important thing to see that nothing really has meaning. While at the same time, it's completely pointless because when you go back to the world of like the experience of things having inherent meaning, which is, I think, normal consciousness, um, go back to comparing things. And so it's so easy to think that I know that the universe has no meaning and therefore I am better than others. You're giving the universe meaning. It's it's you're taking away from the truth you just learned.
Yeah, I think that's a common experience, especially when like at least for me, the first time that I did DMT, it was just like uh, I wanted it to be this like massive experience where I learned so much, and I just got laughed at. Like I showed up, and it was just it like these beings were just making fun of me. They were like, "Aha, you think you're here to learn something, but in reality, we're just gonna make your backyard melt for a while and make fun of you while you struggle to comprehend it." Like it's it's also whimsical, and that's such a good thing. I mean, that just has made me such a more calm and understanding person in real life. Like when I come back down to earth here, leave Mars, leave the elves behind, come back down, it makes me understand that like everything's okay regardless of what's going on. It's all good. It's just there's there's bad things that are going to happen, and it's going to hurt, and your emotions are going to get the better of you, and that's fine. It's not a big deal. But at the end of the day, there's just so much going on around you that you don't know the experience of some small homeless child in India somewhere, and but yet his life is happening the same as yours, and it's huge. It's a huge deal for him. Every day's a struggle, and you're over here, worrying about the fact that your bank account got a little lower than $500 or something. It's just the experience is massive, and you're just a very small speck in it. And the Gates of the Necronomicon has helped me to learn that, because when you step through that gate, for people who haven't read it, the idea is that when you're studying the universe, you leave the realm of existence and step through a gate that takes you outside of your human existence, so that you can kind of observe the world from an outer place, a place that's not defined by physics or the universe or the world or whatever it may be. It's just a place where everything exists all at once. It's sort of this multiverse idea where everything is true and nothing is true at the same time. And that to me was so wacky to try and come to terms with. But once you really understand that the whole point is that it doesn't make sense, and that life doesn't really make sense, it starts to kind of bring things into perspective. You just live your life the way that you would want to be, and to be happy. And I get a lot of people who are like, well, okay, if you have no sense of morality, if there's no such thing as sin, or if there's no such thing as good and bad, then like what's stopping you from just being a terrible person? And the fact of the matter is, I just don't like it. I just don't feel good being a bad person. And then that became the center of my morality spectrum. It wasn't because the church told me what was good and bad, or because some guy said that he went up on a mountain and talked to God and brought back commandments. Like, I can still look at that and go, yeah, I agree with that. I'm on board with that, 100%. That's fine. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel good about myself. It makes me feel good about my loved ones and the people around me. And I'm just not a dick. That's all it comes down to.
It's an interesting thought.
I mean,
I
I still am.
Yes, you are. I am as well. I think we all are. I think if we avoid the thought that we are dicks, we are lying to ourselves. Just
Yeah.
just in the same way, because like we're the ones who come up with whatever a dick is. Um, and since we make that decision on some level, first we believe that one, if you're a dick, you're not winning, and then two, you have to win, and so therefore you are not a dick. But the world is far more wacky than that. It is far more of a game than that, and games are fought with our entire selves, the parts that we think we are and the parts that we think we aren't. Um, and then we decide how seriously we take it from there, and either it's not a big deal to be a dick, or it's a huge deal to be a dick. And each one just signifies like how much do I care about this game here on Earth? Like how much do I care about the game of impressing others, or the game of just wanting to be what I want to be, or the game of um, trying to be exactly what I believe some dude in the sky thinks I'm supposed to be, but projecting a lot of my own beliefs onto that dude in the sky rather than actually listening to some force beyond myself.
Yeah, you really recently had a very deep experience with the idea of life being a game. You came out to my place and had your ego absolutely obliterated on my couch while I played RuneScape. Talk us through that. What's that like? What does that feel like? What is that?
Yeah,
What did you glean from
yeah,
that?
I'll talk about it a bit. And I've written a little bit about it since then. I actually have one of those journal entries up already. I was thinking about talking about it today. Um, and I know Alan Watts has talked about life being a game that we just forget is a game. Um, but I had not seen that before then, and I only found it afterwards, looking to see like if anyone else had had this experience. Um, but I realized that like from the very beginning of our lives, first we should start interacting with the unknown through our actions. This can involve communicating with crying or other facial emotions as a baby. Um, and then we learn more advanced ways of communicating with the unknown of what's beyond us. And I use the word the unknown, but what I really mean is our parents or whoever is taking care of us or our immediate surroundings, involving our community, things like that, um, that we truly have no control over as a baby. And all we have is this way to try and get the unknown to come and help us when we're hurt. Um, and because the unknown does that, we love it. Or if the unknown doesn't do it, then we avoid it. We're scared of it. So whether that's a parent or a sibling or anything like that, I think the rules hold true. And from there, we learn that we like certain feelings and we dislike certain feelings. Um, I wouldn't actually say we learn that. I would say that we start to put meaning into that when we start playing games as kids. Um, we're told that winning is good and we should try to do it. And then we go out and play games as kids. And if we win, we feel awesome. And if we lose, we feel like we're not good enough. Um, and in that picture of winning and losing, we start to play bigger and bigger games like entering relationships and having to get good grades or going to university or working. And suddenly these games do impact our world. And so, because they're impacting our world, we suddenly think this isn't a game anymore. When in truth, it's still just a game. It just looks and sounds and feels a little different now. You know, we're different people. We're in different bodies. We've grown up a lot. But growing up doesn't necessarily mean getting wiser or uh, getting a bigger picture of the world. All it really means is the way we see the world is different, um, and the way we see ourselves is different as well. But it's still just experiences where we try to put in certain effort with certain strategies to achieve certain results, to believe certain things about ourselves. Um, and it's interesting, we don't control the game. That's the strangest part is the game's happening and it plays by everyone's rules all at the same time because everyone is their own self and everyone's making the rules up as they go. And so I can't control the state of the game very much, but I still stake my whole identity in how I'm doing in that game. And so one of the biggest things I took out of that was asking myself, like, by having this belief, what game am I playing? What does a winner look like because of this belief? And is this actually serving me very well, or is this um, hurting me and making me choose a strategy that's actually counterproductive to my own personal goals as a person? And I was realizing that for a long time I've been using these very counterproductive strategies um, because I believed that these strategies would make me worthwhile as a person, and that was what I was going for. Um, but since it's just a game, I don't need to stake my identity in it. And now, whatever's coming to me, I recognize most of it's beyond my control. But the things I bring to the next turn are very within my field. I can decide how much sleep I get in a night, roughly. I mean, I'm not like some divine being that just magically stays asleep all night every night and never has interruptions in sleep or things like that. But I can at least make an impact there, and I can decide, um, I want to spend this much time outside today, and that's going to give me what I need to play this game in a well organized way. That's going to serve me better in life. Um, and it sounds a little selfish, but the truth is, I can't play the game for anyone else. Um, I can't see the world perfectly through someone else's eyes. I only see what I only perceive my own uh, vision of what others are feeling, but it's my vision, and that perception is mine. It's still not them. So it's like Paul says that for now we see through a glass darkly. Um, there's a world I'm trying to look into and make judgments from, and pick patterns that will lead me to joy. But at the same time, I'm not seeing very much. And so, how much should I stake in my choices of my past? And how much should I just focus on doing the best with what I have in this moment?
I'm gonna disagree with one
Let's
thing
hear
you
it.
said. I am a divine being that can control how much sleep I get. I just take a shit ton of bromozolam before I go to bed,
Divinity
and
comes through Bermazolam
it's no
usage.
problem. I could sleep for 11, 12 hours
Well,
easy.
okay, but you're not going to stay asleep for 16. You're going to wake up. Unless you take enough, I guess.
I mean, I could. I could just take more. There's always more to be taken. It's just up my dose. Yeah, no, I think I think it was incredibly insightful. I mean, something that I had not experienced myself, and just hearing you talk about it was really cool. I'm glad that you got to have that experience, and I think the idea of everything being a game, and just the implication not only that it is a game and that you know there's consequences to winning and or losing, but you shouldn't define yourself by it. But at the end of the day, you still have to play. You can't just give up and not play because then you're not progressing. You're
We're
just doing
born to
nothing,
play.
and that's actually the worst thing you can do. Like winning or losing. Winning's fine, losing's fine, but not playing is not fine. It's just it's damning. It stops you from making any movement, any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think, like, in so many ways, like, um, a phrase that's been coming to my mind lately is the only winning move is to not play. And that's just because of some of the circumstances I've been put into. The old games that I used to be involved with are no longer applicable to my life and will not serve me anymore. So I have to leave those games aside. But the game of life, um, I mean, you can choose to not play, but you're a human being and you're born to play. That's the game. You're just an animal. You know, you have these instincts, and they have pushed you to find meaning, and they have pushed you to form relationships and push you to learn about the way things work. Why? Because you don't want to be hungry, because you want a nice bed to sleep on, because you want a roof over your head, because you want someone to spend life with, because you don't want to be alone, because you're afraid of dying alone, because you're afraid of dying not having everything you want to do done. Um, and we tell ourselves, like, at a very deep level that I'm not sure we can really uh, make disappear. Um, and we become very afraid of those things, and that's our losing condition. And so we'll do anything to avoid those losing conditions, um, even if the strategy doesn't make sense. A lot of times we pick our strategies not by clear and precise thought that involves reflection, but a lot of our strategy is just built into us through instinct, through our DNA, and through our childhood experiences. Um, that doesn't make it any less significant. You know, I think those things are just as valuable as um, giving things a lot of thought. And I think they both just serve their own place in the game, and there's a reason we're able to do both. Um, it's what works. It's what gets us to the next generation. It is the process of evolution in action, and that's what we are. We're just animals. Um, one of my I'll read part of my note that I wrote that day. Um, this was a few weeks after I had had that experience. I was visiting my family for the holidays for a couple weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and we were playing a board game called Azul. I won't explain the details of the game, but there are different turns where everyone gets to make choices that affect everyone else's play. But there's something that people keep between each turn, and that's actually what's helping them score. So people want to take the right things from the shared state and keep them for themselves each turn so that they can score points. Um, in this game, you really only control uh, what you go for each round, and each round is quite independent from the prior rounds and future rounds. At no point while I'm playing this game am I thinking, shit, I should have played differently earlier. I entirely trust my past choices because I know that one, my strategy here is good, and two, I was working with what I had in front of me, right? And knowing both of those things, I don't feel like I'm going to regret my choices that I'm currently making in this turn. And as the game goes on, I usually have a lot of fun knowing that a lot of the game isn't up to me. A lot of the choices that I make are presented to me without my involvement, and simply the choice of it belongs to me. And I was wondering why it's so different in life when what we're thinking about a lot of the time is why isn't the game giving me what I need? When in reality, like what gives us the most out of the game is focusing on what we're bringing to it each turn and the direction that we're taking in general. Um, I think that's so much more important to focus on and to feel our worth counted by. The state of the game is going to change in our favor sometimes and against our favor in other times, and it's just a game. Like most of it's not in our control. Most of it we don't even see. So why put our worth into what's being given to us?
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting connotation here that I want to convey without giving away too much personal information. And I think it's a really good segue into something that I wanted to read while we're talking, a Reddit post that I had sent in the little chat here. But you went into this experience, this very, very heavy psychedelic experience, kind of almost seeking answers to a traumatic experience that was going on in your life. And not answers necessarily, but seeking clarity. And I find it really interesting and kind of funny that your answer wasn't one way or the other. It wasn't like a how do I fix this or what do I do in this situation. It was just the answer ultimately was it doesn't matter. It's just a
Yeah,
game.
I'm gonna.
And you're just playing a game.
Sorry, I was gonna say I'm gonna run to the restroom real quick. I thought you were at the end of your thought. I will be back in like 3 minutes.
All right. Phlank is back from doing drugs in the bathroom.
Um, there's something else I wanted to talk about with the game thing. Um, this trip was also really significant. I went in chasing answers regarding my circumstances. Um, and I'll be specific about what this was is a divorce a little while ago. I won't go into specifics about it, but it was significant regardless. So a lot of my trip,
Your divorce was
I
significant. I wouldn't expect a divorce to be insignificant.
it is very significant, though I will not go into detail about
Yeah.
it. I spent a lot of my trip going back in time, um, and kind of walking backwards through the years of my life and reliving things I had not been able to remember ever, in I don't know how long. So eventually, I got to a point in my life where my parents were still together, and this was like before I was 5 years old, basically. Um, I kept going back, and I felt a lot of what it was like to have them together, and then I hit that point of like total ego loss, and I was in the thick of it, and that's where I learned about the game. Um, as I was coming back out, I had this new concept of games, and I watched myself play different games through my life. And one of the games that has affected me the most is this games of trying to fix my parents. Um, when I saw them split apart during that journey, I felt myself rip in half as well. And I realized and watched myself like go through every relationship I've been in with others, like romantic relationships, trying to sew those two pieces of myself back together so that, in a sense, my parents would be okay, and then I would be okay. Um, and I realized that was the game I had been playing with my partners, and it gave me this immense sense of sympathy of like how difficult it must have been um, to talk to me and not entirely know why I was the way I was. Um, that's not to say they didn't see something good in me, um, but knowing it now, I feel like as I move forward in my life, that's going to be something I work alongside as a tool to achieve things that I want to achieve and let it motivate me at times. But for the most part, it is a game that I want to be cognizant of and deliberately remove myself from, because I think that game is an attempt to deny what actually happened when I was a child because I couldn't
Mm.
accept it back then, but I can now.
Yeah, I think that's a really poignant point. Is that like, you know, you do take these traumas that you experience and you bring them into every relationship you're in, regardless of whether or not you want to. And I mean, like in my particular relationship, you know, my wife and I share a lot of similar traumas, especially medical traumas. We both had medical issues, very similar medical issues. And while that's a little bit different from like emotional and spiritual trauma, it still is something that like defines our relationship for good or for bad. Um, and I think that does lead into this post that I found that I wanted to read. It's one of my favorite pastimes is sorting by controversial on r/psychonaut, because there's a lot of people on here that it makes me feel better about myself, because I'm not an idiot. Um, but this one was actually really poignant, and it was controversial because people are disagreeing with it, and I think it goes along with your point really well, because the title of it is "Please talk to your loved ones before using psychedelics to make decisions that affect them." And I'm going to actually amend this title to "Please talk to your loved ones before using any sort of spirituality or religion or anything like that to make decisions that affect them." Because it's not just psychedelics. So the post says, "This isn't just about you. If you're at a point in life where you're lost and you feel like big changes are in order to improve your life, you must always take into account your loved ones. Please don't use psychedelics to decide whether or not you should break up with your girlfriend. Talk to her instead or get therapy." I just read two posts today, one of a guy asking if psychedelics can give him an answer on whether or not to break up with his girlfriend, and another of a girl wondering why LSD would cause her boyfriend to suddenly break up with her. The two posts were unconnected, not the same couple, but two different couples. Neither of them spoke to their girlfriends at all before taking drugs, let's be blunt and call them drugs, and suddenly leaving. True empathy is seeing the universe through the eyes of others instead of only using the two eyes you were given. Talk to your significant other if you're struggling. Mental health must be taken seriously. I think that's a fantastic point. Um, and I think it's something that you and I somewhat differ on as well, because I am very anxious about the idea of using any sort of substance to make changes or decisions in my life. And I think you're very comfortable with the idea of being changed by these experiences, not going into them looking for a specific answer or some sort of like, I don't think that either of us is this person where we go into these big life decisions and just be like, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to drop a couple tabs of acid. I'll get my answer. Bam, done. No problem. I think that your answer that you received for your situation was perfect, because it really was that it wasn't an answer one way or the other. It wasn't do this, go here, do that. And that's always going to be the experience. No matter what you do, if you take a substance and you dive into your own brain, the answer's not there if you're already seeking that answer, because the only information you're receiving is stuff that's already in your brain. And so if you can make that decision while on psychedelics, you could have made that decision sober. You could have done it without prayer, without some sort of like appeal to a higher being or whatever it may be. These decisions that you make and these things that you do, these games that you play, to bring it back to yours, are ultimately yours to do. And these substances aren't going to do it for you. You're not going to be able to go into the DMT realm and ask the elves for advice, because they're just going to give you the finger and tell you to figure it out yourself. And that's extremely true every time. I've never had an experience where I went in seeking an answer and I was just like, oh, cool, I got my answer. I didn't have to think about it. It's not a cheat code for life. You can't just cheat your way through.
I think one thing they do, um, and I think this is really important to note, is that they show us what we're feeling on a very simple level. At least that's what they have done for me. And
Sure.
this simple level is very hard to deny, and that can make it very, very scary. Or it can be hard to deny, and that can make it very, very joyous. Um, and I think a lot of times when people are wondering, like, should I break up with someone or anything similar, should I take this job or not? What they're really asking themselves is, what do I want? Um, they won't give it that name, and as long as the name is, should I break up with this person? The only reason they're having that thought is because part of them thinks it's the way to win whatever game they're playing, um, and they have to give that real consideration. Um, but I think what psychedelics do is they say, here's how you feel. What game do you want to play? And they help you realize your feelings aren't necessarily connected to the games you play as much as they are just a wave, and they're going to go up
Mm.
and down, and you're going to find things to be happy about and things to be sad about no matter what happens.
Yeah, I always look at it like a big like IO board. Like your body is just your body and your emotions are just like inputs and outputs for the world, and you're totally in control of that shit. Like you you can go into things thinking that the feelings that you're feeling are inevitable and these decisions are really difficult or whatever, but that's only because you're assigning that meaning to it. And I've been through big breakups and I've been through bad relationships and whatnot, and I look back at them with no anger or disdain or whatever, and that's not because I'm better than anybody else or anything like that. It's just because at the end of the day, it's exactly what you said. It's, what do I want? What do I want in my life? Do I want to stay in this relationship where I'm not quite happy, but I'm familiar? Or do I want to take the chance, step out into the wilderness and try again and try and find something that's more in align with who I want to be and where I want to be? And that was a big deal for me getting into my current relationship and my marriage, is that like I found somebody that allowed me to not only be who I was at the time, but change over time. I'm completely different as a person than when I got married, and so is my wife. And that's totally okay. And that was the biggest thing for me, is that my old relationship wasn't okay to change. And that's ultimately why it ended. And if I had gone into that relationship trying to cheat my way through and ask, the psychedelic gods if I should end that relationship, the answer probably would have been no, if I had been completely honest with myself, because I didn't want to end my relationship. And in fact, I was dumped. I didn't end that relationship. And the healthiest thing for me was to get out of that relationship, but I had no idea. And so you can't really just trust your own brain to make these decisions. You do need help from other people. You do need help from other experiences and whatnot. And so as we talked about, psychedelics take you into your own brain. And if your own brain is already kind of messed up and you're in a bad situation, it's only going to feed you back that information that you've already got. You're disconnecting your IO board from everybody else and from the world and from other inputs, and you're just dealing with information that's already in the hard drive of your brain. And so you could get an answer theoretically during a trip that ends up being something you don't necessarily need to do. It just may be what you want to do, and it could be ultimately destructive. And that's a little bit dangerous. I think it is important to really talk to people, especially like when you came out to visit me. You told me exactly what your intentions were. You knew where you were going, what you were doing, and a good trip sitter or a good experience on a trip when you have a sitter is somebody who can just kind of help you through that and kind of talk you through what you're feeling and help you to see things objectively. Because if you don't have that and you go into it with just the information that's in your brain and your experiences, then all you're going to do is just amplify noise that's already there. And for me, at least, in my experience, that's terrible. It does not help in any way, shape, or form. It's not it's not a way to resolve situations, because you're going into it expecting an outcome, and that outcome is almost definitely never going to be what you get.
Yeah. I think you nailed it. I think they help you see what is actively unresolved. Um, but outside of that, yeah, they do nothing to solve it. They do nothing to, um, I guess, push things in a certain direction. It's you are the one pushing, and there may be some guiding force given certain drugs, especially mushrooms, in my experience, and any analog of that. Um, but for the most part, you know that it's coming from within you, and if you go in there expecting to find divine truth and you find yourself instead and you find some gross things out about yourself that you weren't expecting or you weren't prepared for, um, you might come out of that thinking that you need that other person by your side for some consistency, even though they're abusive. Or you might need that other person by your side for consistency, even though they're um, not not a very good contributor to your mental health in other ways, or they're not a good contributor physically to a relationship. Anything like it might make you think that you're worth less and therefore need someone more. When in reality, we don't need people, um, but having people is still very very enjoyable. But
Yeah,
but
I think that just boils down to like if you've got poor mental health, you know, it's not going to change when you're on psychedelics. Like they're very usable for therapy for people who have poor mental health, but altering your brain isn't going to get rid of your poor mental health. It's still there. Yeah,
it
it's
takes
still something
work
that you're going to have to deal
afterwards.
with. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes integration, and that's something I've been learning a lot about in 2022. Um, and recently just bought a few books specifically about like therapeutic use and integration. And I've the only reason I had that experience I had at your house is because of one of those books. It's called Psychedelic Psychotherapy. Um, I forget the rest of the title, but it's a really simple book to understand and very simply describes what the person going through the therapy uh, can focus on and what the person, whoever, whether it's a sitter or a therapist or whatever, can do to be effective in that role as well. And it's interesting. The thing that the sitter does more than anything is one, remind the person to breathe, and two, let the person feel whatever they're feeling and not interject. Um, and the person who's going through the therapy, their job is to breathe and focus on like bodily sensations or certain walls coming down within themselves and purposefully facing them. Um, but it happens the best when both participants just let it happen and don't ask for anything from it.
Hmm.
Um, the intent is there to give you some things that are more present on your conscious mind than others, and that can tend to steer the direction of a psychedelic experience because recency is really really important in human psychology. Um, if we have been like winning a slot machine 100 times, I won't use a slot machine example. If we have been winning a game a certain way 100 times, and then the next 5 times we lose that game, um, there's a good chance we will stop using that strategy because we have been shown that that strategy doesn't work anymore. Something about the game's different. Um, I forget where I was going. I completely lost where I started that thought.
I think the ultimate takeaway is please talk to the people you're going to be around before you
Yes.
take psychedelics. They will help you. You will not be able to help yourself, especially if you're going into it without anybody around you knowing that you're going into it. I've had this experience. I took a large dose of Pitocin before finding out that there were going to be some people at my house that I didn't know. And I ended up having dinner with a bunch of people that were new to me while just fucking tripping, blasting my mind off. And it's not good. It's not good. From two people who love psychedelics, please do not misuse them because it's not fun. It's not a good time. And I'm not just talking about for the person using them. I'm talking about the people around you. They don't want to have to deal with that. So make sure that you're informing everybody and being responsible, because that's a recipe for disaster. And that said, definitely leads us into the second post that I wanted to read. I'll let you read this one because I'm going to die laughing about halfway through if I read it. So you go ahead and pull
I'll
this one
read.
up.
Yeah. I'm gonna skip the edits on this first read through because there's like
Yeah, yeah,
seven
yeah.
of them, and there's like three last edits. My friend had an ego death, and the first words out of his mouth was, "I should kill myself." I was trip sitting my 32-year-old friend, call him Jay. Jay is not the most confident guy and the most put together. I told him he should try acid and he gave it a go. This is his second time doing it. I asked, "How come you've never been with a woman?" And he started to cry. God, what an asshole. I tried to calm him down and we talked. Then he just laid down quietly, sprung up, saying he fixed his brain. I didn't think anything of it. I kept talking to him, but he just told me to be quiet. He said he was thinking of something even bigger. After that, he started freaking out, screaming no. He asked if he was God. It was like he was in disbelief. After all that, he just sat down, started straight, and just said, "I should kill myself." And I got freaked out. After that, he kept repeating, "Infinite happiness, I'm dead," and other things. At one point, he was telling himself, "Just do it." I'm not sure if this is a bad thing or a good thing. He spent his whole life afraid in his house all the time. After he sobered up, he said he thought he died or felt like he died. Do you guys have any input? Um,
Oh my God, Jesus
this is such
Christ!
a
Here's some
disappointing
acid.
post.
How come you've
You
never
hate
been with a
yourself, do
woman,
some
you
acid.
fucking
Why
nerd?
haven't you ever been with a woman? Let me just tackle your biggest. Let me just ask you about your biggest insecurity while you're getting
Oh,
blasted.
Jesus Christ! I hate this. I hate everything about this. I just I mean, the fact that this person even has to ask if someone repeating over and over again that they should kill themselves is a bad thing or a good thing. You're fucking lost, dude. You're way too far into this wacky ass drug culture if you really think that that's ever a good thing. I just I don't even know what to think here. I mean, like it's just it's so rude to your friends. I mean, it's a question you wouldn't ask somebody sober. You know, how come you've
Yeah,
never been with a woman? I mean, like maybe in a very specific circumstance, but you've just made this person extremely vulnerable, and then just basically was like, the
you
top
attacked
comment
them.
is exactly what I'm thinking. Like, hey man, here's some acid. On a side note, why are you a fucking loser? I mean, and to be completely clear, there's nothing wrong with the fact that he has never been with a woman. That's totally acceptable. But goddamn, I mean, you just don't know what people are going through, and bringing that up when their brain is just strung out and dealing with all of their internal trauma is the worst thing that you could have done. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
that you're encouraging a trip that is going to be bad, and the person's going to get nothing out of it.
There is there's a few things happening here too, and like I definitely want to talk about suicide and psychedelics because I think it's big and it is also something I have faced. Um, but like I want to give a message to anyone who like trips it, or is going to trips it and has never trips at before. Um, the two best things you can do are, um, if they seem like they're going to hurt themselves, ask them to sit down or lay down and breathe. Um, and if they're getting distracted, and this is for a therapeutic reason, just ask them to sit down, lay down, and breathe. Um, that is the most important thing that you can do when you are facing something difficult. Um, and encouraging the one who's tripping and is unaware of what's going on to do something safe, and reassure them that if they do so, everything will be okay. That's the best thing you can do for someone. The worst thing you can do for someone is give them any reason to believe that they are insufficient as a human being. Um, it is the least healing thing you can do. It is traumatic. It is going to put them into this web of illogical defense mechanisms that normally would work when sober, but because you're tripping, are actually going to just feed into the feedback loop. And instead of defending you from something, they're going to send you down into uh, psychosis or
Yeah,
having
I'm gonna say,
some sort of thoughts
I'm
that are completely nonsensical, just delusional thinking.
I'm gonna say if confidence is your issue and self confidence is your issue, just don't try to work that out through psychedelics. I mean, like they literally require you to be extremely confident in your own brain. And there's a reason why people who have like bipolar disorders and manic depression should not be taking psychedelics, because it literally is just a confidence issue and an ego issue. And this is like the worst possible thing you can do to your brain is go, oh, I'm just not very confident in myself, so I'm going to take something that deconstructs my entire sense of being. That's going to make it worse. It's absolutely going to make it worse. I know there's a lot of people out there that think that psychedelics heal everything, but in this particular case, I'm going to completely disagree. It's just not the case.
It's I will say I think it has potential too, but it's absolutely not just the drug, right? Like
Right.
I think this particular type of experience you require some tools going in if you decide to try and identify things with psychedelics. And those tools take work to practice so that even when you are um, under a different state of consciousness, you can still utilize them. Um, for me, these tools are like cognitive behavioral therapy, which actually falls short most of the time when compared to realizing that you don't have to act on anything that you're feeling under the influence, that nothing is really asking you to do anything. And
That's a
what
big
you
one
can
too.
do
Yeah.
is, yeah, what you can do is just lay down and breathe. And it will always end. It will always end. Um, and if you feel like it's scary, the ride will end and you'll get off and you'll be like, wow, that was a scary ride. As long as you just choose to accept it as scary and not act on the fear. If you act on the fear, you may end up in medical or legal consequences, or you may hurt yourself, or you may hurt someone you love. Like there's so many things that can happen. Um, I want to share one experience I have. Um, I took a decently high dose. I think it was the highest measured dose I had done at the time. It was like 33 milligrams of 4-ACO DMT, and I took this on a day where I felt down, and I had a feeling it was a bad idea, but I had been doing a lot of really hard work and I wanted to give myself a reward, and this was the way I did so. Um, and it seemed like once it started, there was no way to make it good. And one of the themes that had been on my mind lately was the idea of destroying myself. Um, and I did go through a lot of suicidal ideation during that experience. But when I finally sat down and laid down and breathed, and I said, "Okay, this is me. Show me what else is here." Like I don't want to die. Like I want to kill myself, but I don't want to die, and I'm going to lean into that second one way harder right now. Um, and I realized in that experience that I don't want to die means I have a belief on some level that I can make my life worth living. And if as long as I have that fear, even if it's not even a fear that I chose, it's just a fear that's given to me by nature. That means on some level that I am built to change the world around me and improve it to suit my abilities. And once I realized that that like logical consequence of that fear, I was able to identify ways that I was actively doing that in my world right now, even though my situation was very difficult in the moment. Um, and that was for me a very healing experience. But it took a lot of asking questions and accepting the answers, and recognizing that I did not have to do anything about this problem right now to be able to get through that.
Yeah, I think if you're prepared to address some sort, I mean, it's clear to me in this post that this friend was already struggling with suicidal
Yeah,
ideation. I mean, it's very clear, and his friend, the trip sitter, clearly didn't understand that and should not have been giving this person acid to deal with that because they didn't know. I mean, if you're going into it with the idea that, like, I have suicidal ideation and I'm going to address that with these psychedelics, that's cool. Like, I'm on board with that. Definitely get help from a therapist for sure. I mean, a buddy trip sitting you is not a therapist, and most therapists will totally talk you through a psychedelic experience as well. I mean, not during, but they will help you. They're not going to just completely disregard you if that's something that you choose to do. But yeah, just helping your buddy out with suicidal feelings by giving him acid and sitting on the couch with him is just not working. I mean, if you're, in my opinion, if you're feeling anxious about something like this and you're having issues with self worth, and you just need to, like in your case, you said you wanted to do it as a reward to yourself. Um, that's kind of a dangerous mindset, to go into a drug experience as some sort of like reward, or like oh, I'm gonna let myself escape from the world for a while. I mean, if you're gonna
exactly.
do that, smoke some weed. You know, just to take an edible and just relax. Don't go into a serious traumatic experience with a psychedelic. Just if you have to get out of your mind, do something safe and just something comforting. It's these are not safe, comforting experiences usually, 9 times out of 10, and that's kind of the point of it. It's not super recreational. I mean, it can be. I'm not going to tell you not to. I'm not your dad, but definitely, if you're dealing with some sort of like anxiety, depression, something like that, and you're not getting help from a therapist, I would not recommend a psychedelic experience. I would definitely say don't go chasing an escape in a psychedelic experience, because the worst part of it is that it ends, and
Hmm.
that's only going to increase that desire for some sort of escape, that suicidal ideation there. So
Completely agree. My decision was dumb. Do not follow in my footsteps.
yeah, I'm going to agree with that. It's not a fun thing to do on an afternoon where you've had a bad day. It's not a way to wind down.
Yeah.
Have a beer, smoke a blunt. Jesus.
Watch some YouTube.
Yeah, just chill out. I mean, it's a serious experience that you're getting yourself into, especially acid, man. I mean,
It's so long.
it is so long. I can only imagine that Jay here was probably under the influence for a better part of a day, and had to deal with facing his desire to commit suicide for that whole time. And I'm making this up, of course. This information is not in here, but from a perspective of somebody who's been through similar things, both you and I, it's almost definitely what he was feeling. And I did see in the edits that you didn't read, of course, that his friend apologized to him, and that's good. I'm not saying this is a bad friend or anything like that. He made a bad decision, and I get it. It happens, especially amongst people who take drugs. You're gonna have experiences like this where you do some dumb shit, and it is what it is. I mean, he lived. He's okay. It sounds like, from what I can understand, that he's more comfortable with his situation than the friend thinks that he is. But yeah, that's I couldn't
Yeah.
believe it when I read this. Just
To
as a
me, it
trip
look.
sitter, just leave your person alone. Let
Yeah.
them let them experience it. And if they ask for something, then get it for them. But don't just start bringing up traumas just to incite a
The
response.
worst thing you
That's
can do
rough.
as a trip sitter is to try and guide the real guide. Um,
Yes.
it is selfish. It is a belief that you have control over someone's future, and that if you try hard enough, that you can save them from whatever is ailing them. And that is one of the most toxic beliefs you can have about someone else. And
Yeah,
that's what
absolutely.
this guy
That's
went in with. He felt like if I talk to this guy about what he's worried about, he'll get better because that's how this works. And you don't the sitter doesn't get to pick how it works. It's just not the right way.
so. After reading this post, I've decided next time you come out to visit, I'm going to make you boof 4 grams of shrooms, and then we're going to listen to old voicemails from your ex-wife. That is the plan. Um, we're gonna dive straight in head first to that
I think that's a
experience.
solid plan.
Yeah,
I
and
think
I'm
we
gonna
need to
I'm gonna
start
do
with the
crack while we do
happy
it as well.
ones. Yeah, we'll start with the happy ones and then get into the worst ones. And then,
Perfect.
between there, I'll have come up quite a bit and we can have a good time.
Oh
I,
man, in the middle of it, we'll just do shots.
I'm down. You know what? Honestly,
Oh,
like if you ask me to do anything in that state, I'll probably do it. I'll trust you.
yeah. Well, I mean, the problem with you is I could tell you to do anything, and you would do it regardless of
That's
whether you
true.
were sober or not. So
Unless it's like taking a shot of liquor, that's not on the table.
you
That,
say that, but you were here, and I told you to do it, and you did it anyway.
it took a lot
So
of effort on your
that's
part.
out. Yeah, you did do it while you were here. I know you don't drink much, but when you're here, you do.
That's true.
So
I
you can
just,
say
I
that all
just,
you want.
you are one of the most enabling people I know, and at the same time, it's so good for me.
I'm glad it's good for you. It's not good for anybody else. Uh, yeah. Well, we've all got problems. Mine is that I tell people to do things that are bad for them. And I think that's why I find this post funny. I want to clear the air. I do not find suicide funny. I just find it funny that during this experience, his only question that he could think of to ask his friend is why he was still a virgin. It's just, it's so rude.
It's so bad.
it's, it's the worst thing I've ever read. There's so many other things that he could have brought up. I mean, like I'm all about working through trauma, but Jesus, that's not even trauma. That's just trying to break your friend's spirit. Terrible, terrible. Oh man. Well, we are at about an hour and a half now, so I think we'll wind it down, call it a day.
Sounds good.
But I appreciate you joining me here at the inn. Hopefully, next time we will have an additional guest who can provide more insight and be less of an asshole than I am about bad trip experiences.
I
But
think
yeah, thank you for doing this with me, talking through your experiences. I'd love to hear them because you have a lot more insight than I do. I just do dumb shit and then don't write it down afterwards. So I don't have a lot of input, of course.
my input, I try to make it valuable, but this is the end, and a lot of it's just more about me than and the value that I see in it than the actual real value it might have, which is not very much. But thanks if you're listening. Fuck you if you're not.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. We're going to try and do this every Sunday morning, hopefully. So feel free to join us for our regular Sabbath day observance of psychedelics and other crazy shit that we read. Thank you very much. See you later.